Vortrag von Yves Moreau. Er ist in Belgien geboren, hat in Brüssel und in Göteborg studiert und hat dann einige Zeit bei Dominique Perrault und Christian Dior gearbeitet und hat mit seinem Partner 2006, er hat gesagt ungefähr, das Studio Muoto gegründet in Paris. Und ich danke dir mal fürs Kommen. Thank you very much for coming from Paris. Er ist gestern schon angekommen am Abend und war heute eigentlich ziemlich viel mit ihm unterwegs. Und ich wünsche euch einen interessanten Abend und er wird auf Englisch sprechen und nicht auf Französisch. Damit auch ich es verstehe. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Arno, for the invitation. I mean, we're of course very pleased to be here. I spent 1 year in Vienna at the TU teaching last year, and by invitation of Dietmar Festinger, he took one of the departments in Vienna at the TU, and we did 2 studios. One was about a theater, and one was about a barricade. And so that's why the title of the lecture today, School of Barricades. It was the title of the studio of last semester. And we start with a project. It's more an installation in Logrono. It's a few kilometers south of Bilbao, and we were invited to take part of a kind of architecture installation exhibition inside the city. And we did this installation with a friend, he's Gorgi Stanishev, and we did also with Gorgi the ball theater in the Venice pavilion, in the French pavilion. And yeah, we liked the idea that you could create a wall next to the wall of the city. You see on the left, it's like the really big wall that was surrounding the city, and we thought it was interesting to interact with this very specific condition of the site, of this urban condition of the site, this material condition, to recreate a kind of a piece of a wall that could be at the same time very basic, because it's a wall, but at the same time very refined. And it could also recreate a room. If I just go behind here, you see there is you have this existing wall, and this is the wall we created. It's a small platform, and it created a kind of a space behind there that could be used for small performances. I'm not sure if there was any, but we thought it was interesting to redefine a room on this location. And it is a particular construction because it looks very solid but very fragile at the same time. The exhibition, I mean the whole event lasted for 1 week. So you had to make a wall that was a wall that could hold as a wall, that has the weight with these big cinder blocks that you could transport easily, that you could mount and unmount afterwards easily, and cheap, of course, because they had a very cheap budget. So we had in mind this kind of way of stacking these cinder blocks on these wooden pallets, I don't know the English word, and we said maybe we can reuse that to as a starting point for the construction of our wall. And you see, this is the space we saw on the picture. This is the big wall. I mean, it's a very large, very fat wall, and we came with our wall here, creating this this kind of almost hidden room behind. There it is. It is. It is somehow also kind of very, I mean, technical. I mean, we were designing it and building it almost at the same time because the whole process was very, very fast. The base was actually needed to stabilize the wall because otherwise it would fall, and even the wooden elements, they were there to kind of have the, how do you call it, the bracing of this wall and to kind of maintain it. And it was also able to easily, I mean, transport it, and so all the wooden elements were built in a wood shop next to the site, and then we came with these almost prefab elements, like big brick elements placed one on top of each other. So it's a real question how to make a temporary wall that could last for 1 week, that you could mount. We had the idea to have 6, levels of these elements, but they called us that when there is too much wind, it was not, was not stable enough. So we said, oh, maybe we stop at 5. We don't want the whole thing to break down. And yeah, we liked the fact that you could have an architecture that was temporary, that you could build, unbuild, and you could maybe take it apart and move and reconstruct it somewhere else. And it comes to this idea of a barricade, because it looks almost like a barricade. It's like a wall you build to block or to divide. And this idea of a barricade, it's I think for us it was an interesting typology, kind of a good starting point to look at some of our projects and to see what we thought was interesting. We liked also the fact that this wall and the barricade, it's what we call proto-architecture. It's not yet completely architecture. Before it has maybe some of the intentions of the intensities of an architectural project, but it's not yet architecture. And we thought also that this figure of the barricade is an architecture of, revolution, but it's also an architecture of freedom and emancipation. So we try to think of this architecture of the barricade as also in terms of constraint, and try to see what's the relation between freedom and constraint by using the barricade as a starting point to see what's possible, what it allows, what are the constraints, and what's not possible. So we went to, we did a small study about the barricades through history, and this is the plan of Paris with the location of all the barricades they had during these revolutions in the 19th century. This is what it looked like, kind of a bunch of objects that they found in the street and that they kind of superposed. We've seen all these barricades through the revolution, not only in Paris, but also in Europe. Augusto Blanqui, he made a kind of a manual of how to build a good barricade, And there was a whole strategy in how to block a street, where you should block it, and how do you make it solid. So it's kind of a fortification. It's interesting to see that it has been theorized and has been thought of how can we really build it. There have been also artistic interventions about the barricades. This one, for example, is an art installation where the idea was to say, if we make a barricade made out of really nice art pieces, maybe the armed forces would not dare to destroy them and we would be safe behind the barricade. It's an art installation. I don't know if it really happened. And last year there was an exhibition in Vienna at the MAC about protest architecture, and it was pure coincidence. We had the idea to talk about barricades, and our assistant said, "Oh yeah, but there is an exhibition at the MAC." Oh, interesting. I mean, good. So let's bring the students there. So we brought our students to visit the exhibition. We met the curator Sebastian Hagenschmidt at the MAC, and he toured us around. And for us, it was a good starting point to explain to students, okay, what is protest architecture, and from there, where do we go? So we saw that, I mean, this protest architecture, they can start to have a real architectural form. I mean, this pyramid, this kind of floating net that are above the streets, because I mean there is a rule that if people are above 2 meters, 2.50 meters, the police cannot just pull them and drag them on the ground. So they need special equipment to pick them up. So it takes time. The whole strategy of these barricades is to delay actually the intervention of the armed forces. So there is a whole strategy of getting off the ground or gluing yourself to the ground, because I mean they cannot just cut your hand. So there are many ways of slowing down the intervention of the police. And they had really nice examples of raised villages that were floating in the air, and they did these models, and it is actually a real structural construction. I mean, because it needs to hold. I mean, if you do a whole system that's attached to the trees or to lighting poles and stuff like that, so you need some engineering and architecture. How do you pull the strings? How do you make the knots? How do you make the floors so it holds so you don't crash? So there is a whole, kind of part of engineering behind these constructions. And of course, I mean, there were many examples, so we took a few. These are all the examples of the roundabouts. I think this is in Cairo, but we could have shown also the examples of the roundabouts in France, where we had the yellow vest movement that were kind of really occupying the roundabouts because it was a crossing point. And so they could block the cars or let pass the cars. It had also a kind of a nice idea of these textile structures. I mean, they were not for the night, but more for the day to protect from the sun. And there were actually many sizes of sun protection because they need to stay there. So, and they realized that when they did this huge surfaces, it was not very good because of the wind. So they finally kind of divided them and made smaller elements. And then, yeah, we did with a French artist that we work with, Pierre Le Guyon, we did a small fanzine. And a fanzine is a small kind of homemade booklet that you kind of print and then you kind of distribute, kind of do it yourself, kind of somehow kind of a punk attitude. And we worked with the students on a street in Vienna called Maria-Hilfer-Straße. It's a long street that goes, and it's half commercial now and half not, but it has been refurbished for 2 or 3 kilometers. And so we said, okay, each student had to take, 100 to 150 meters of the street and make a barricade. So just, this is the Maria-Hilfer-Straße, if I remember well. I think it's, I don't see, difficult to see from here. It's there. Up, somewhere till here. And this part was really commercial, and this one was not yet refurbished. But so we had 6 groups of students, and we asked them to take 6 typologies of barricades from the exhibition as a starting point. For us, it was maybe a kind of a shortcut, but it was a bit faster because otherwise I wouldn't have time to develop the projects. The idea was that some of them did really big structures. Some of them made kind of smaller structures and made foam, like foam you could just spray on the streets to block the flow of the movements. You had some that made inflatable structures, or some that made lifted structures. So they were all kind of taken from the MAC exhibition as a starting point. And the idea behind it is, okay, once you start doing a barricade, how do you transform that into a temporary architecture and then to a permanent architecture? And that was somehow the exercise, which is not easy. It was, I think, a very difficult exercise, a studio, because we had no program. It's not like, okay, you have room, you have toilets, you have entrance, a staircase, which is easy as an architect because you just follow the brief and you have a function. And there the students had to really somehow invent their own function and their own program and story, and still made a kind of a barricade building that somehow interacted with the public space, that changed something in the street. And so, yeah, they made different structures, elements. I'll just show a few of the pictures. So it was a real question about how to transform this temporary architecture into permanent architecture. Yeah, that's not the students, that's us. That's us playing with mixing up all our projects together into one large barricade structure. I don't know what it is. But it was the idea that we could invent an architecture that calls for occupation or encourage for occupation. So why would you occupy an architecture? Why would you go there? What does it mean to occupy an architecture? And we think, for instance, examples as a stadium. A stadium can be completely empty or completely full of people, and it changes so much of the feeling and the mood and the architecture of the space itself. And it's probably because there is something about time, about it's temporary. So it's a temporary occupation of a space which was probably not defined. So there's a question about how do you define or undefine the spaces, and what calls somehow to, what kind of architecture calls to climb on it, for example. I mean, a barricade, I mean, it's kind of a bunch of things and you want to climb up on and try to be on top, so you're on top of your barricade and you block the police. So what kind of architecture call for this type of occupation? This was for a small exhibition we did for Rice University, where we just combined all our models and kind of recreated a structure, but that we hoped would kind of invite to climb up on. And then if we go through these notions and we go through a series of projects we did, and we'll try to see how we can apply these notions of the barricade through the different projects. This one is a project we did in Paris a few years ago for a private developer, and it asked the question of multitude and diversity. This private developer, he usually makes houses, individual houses, and with different styles. They have a catalog with maybe 5 or 7 or 10 different styles, and there the idea was to, how can you be together? How can you make a collective house building, but with a sense of individuality. So we proposed on this very small spot in Paris to make 3 small towers that were interconnected with large outdoor spaces. And so we defined, I mean, because we joked a little bit about this developer. I mean, it's not the best one, but the idea was still okay. The idea was, okay, if they work with a catalog, maybe you can design your own catalog. So we took all the nice, good examples of European or cities in the world. So we had Berlin style, we had Paris style, we had Tokyo style. So we had a catalog of 24 styles. And we said, okay, maybe the inhabitants, for their own private house or a block of floor, they could decide what kind of facade they could have, and they could somehow customize their own apartment. And the space in between is just outside space, and it's a space where you actually meet, and space where you interact, where you have to somehow deal with your neighbor on how you're going to use this in-between space. Is it yours? Is it your own terrace? Is it something you share? And how do you share it? And all the staircase and the elevator, they all gave access to this common space, and then you enter your own private house. So it's a big shelf where we could place all of these different small housing units, and it creates a kind of somehow a collage of different architectural expressions that you could somehow maybe even change afterwards. If you would sell your apartment, you would just change the facade. But it really asks the question, I mean, how do we live together in the individual way, but also as a collective way? So a few of the pictures of this common space and these different experiments on the facades. Another typology of space, it's this project in Saclay, and what we think is interesting when we did this project is that you stage actually the crowd. In Saclay, it's 20 kilometers outside of Paris. It's a new university campus. I mean, there has been one before in the 70s, so you had, like, I would say, a kind of American campus style, a few buildings here and there in the landscape. And then when President Sarkozy said that, the inside Paris, I mean, there was no space to develop all the big, well-known Parisian universities. They had to find a new space, so they moved all of these universities to Saclay. And so it became a campus for universities, but also for businesses, and so they could interact. And it's a huge master plan. And when we came, actually we were the first building. We had just fields around, and afterwards came a huge urban project. So we thought that our project should have in its DNA somehow this urban intensity of what was going to come, but before it actually came. So we created this kind of stage. We are between architecture and infrastructure, where most of the spaces are not completely defined, meaning that the roof, it could be just a roof, but once you place a net around and a basketball on it, it becomes a basketball court. It's still a roof, but it's also a basketball court that the students really use, and even when the building was not completely open, they climbed above the fence and went to the roof, because it's also the only building in the whole development of Saclay where you can go to the roof and you have this view on this countryside landscape of Saclay. And but then there were many other spaces that were not really programmed. This kind of passage linking the street that you see behind and the square where you see the people here. I mean, the passage became a place where we placed the bikes. And then we had floors, in this one, for instance, where we had, I mean, completely no function, and it became a place where the students could wait before going to the restaurant. Because the main function of the building, maybe I can just go back to this section because it's quite clear to explain the functions. We have a small cafe here, like a 7-Eleven that's open from about 7 till 11 or something like that. We have on this level, we have the big dining room, and there we have a kitchen on this level. And the kitchen is also, you have partly on this level because all the storage is on this level, and where you prepare the food is there. On this level, you have a dance room and a fitness room. On the roof, I said you have basketball courts, and here you have, I mean, a kind of a unused, unprogrammed space that we left unprogrammed. We didn't say what they should do. And after a while, I mean, the students use this space as a playing game, table tennis and stuff like that, or waiting when they go to the restaurant. And then all these functions that somehow function in different moments of the day, yeah? Because I mean, this is 7 till 11. The big restaurant is from 12 to 2 o'clock, but the kitchen is from the morning till 2 o'clock. Dance room is maybe in the morning, and in the afternoon, evening. Basketball court is open all the time. And so in this big shelf where we stage somehow the crowd and the life of the building, all of the functions, they're connected to kind of a vertical street. It's a huge staircase which is too wide to be just a fire exit. It's really a staircase that connects the ground floor till the last floor. And then I jump back to the cross section here, where you see the square we have on this side, and there is the street. And this huge staircase connects the public space on the ground floor, then vertically on this in-between zone, which it's a mezzanine, but it's really like an unprogrammed space. And then you go up, you have the restaurant, and then you go up and you have the basketball court on top of the roof. And this space, this staircase is really super important because, I mean, sometimes you feel it's like a bottle of Klein, so you're outside but inside the building at the same time, and it really connects all these different functions. Because at the competition, we removed from the competition brief the entrance hall. We said remove the entrance halls so we can use all the different functions according to the time of the day. Because otherwise, I mean, you close the building in the ground floor and then it's just closed, and then how do I access and how do I control? So the idea was really to have the people be able to go and use different functions in the shelf in different moments of the day. Let's see, here the students, they install this football table game. We imagined, or we proposed to the client, that this space could also become an exhibition space, but at the same time the exhibition space could be used, could be in the big restaurant where we have the double height. And so we said, I mean, there are different options and scenarios that are possible. Yes, and this is at night during was almost finished, where you see this. We finally closed the building, last minute request from the client. But the idea is it's open, it's connected, and you move up the building to the basketball court on top. This is another project. It's a project in Brussels. It's a competition we did, and it talks about constraint, because we think that, I mean, freedom and constraint are very much linked together. I mean, you cannot have one without the other one, and we're not big fans of kind of a free plan where you can just do whatever. We think that constraint can really give you a kind of a freedom, because it helps you to define some of the actions, some of the functions, and how you could occupy these spaces. So it's a project for a school. It's a media school, so they had a variety of different typologies of spaces, going from the extra large one with the studios to the very, very small ones where we have kind of small editing studios, and we had classrooms in between. So this this structure, this kind of very constraining structure, was actually quite adapted to the different functions that were asked in the competition brief. And then, of course, yeah, like I said, because of the different depth, we could adapt different functions, and it worked quite well. We also had the idea that, I mean, I talked about Saclay as a stage, and this is maybe like a big seating, like a stadium, like a auditorium, where you can actually use all these terraces as outside space. It was also on the south, so it was really nice exposition. And the other side was actually kind of like a big screen showing all the different functions, because here we had a square and a park, so you could see this kind of big facade and having all these different functions. So we played with this constraint of the structure, of the depth of the dimension of this pyramidal structure to really organize all the project, and yeah, it became like a big shelf as well on the north and on the south side, with these terraces and with connections where we could go from one terrace to the other terrace. And yes, it's a question of, you know, this structure and of it really felt like a constraint, but it was also kind of an opportunity. And that's something that we liked when we experimented in this project. Matthew Barney, he's an artist, and he plays and he makes this kind of piece of art, but also always in relation to a constraint or a string, or he had to jump very high. So there's a tension, no? And this tension, I think, is for us quite interesting, and at least more interesting than just a free plan where you can do whatever. Structure is one part, typology of spaces, dimensions, all these kind of elements are constraints that, you know, finally kind of, we hope, create more interesting architecture. This is an experiment we did on the urban scale, so another example. Another way of thinking of freedom, or at least our quest of freedom, is to work on scenarios. It's not just about, no, you can do whatever, it's to define what you can do. So we say, these are all the different scenarios that we can do in this building. And this building, we're in the north of Paris, in a very, very tough neighborhood. And the project is, it's a performance center with kind of yeah, performance space, not like really a auditorium. You could imagine an auditorium, but it's not only that. And it's all kind of different kind of performances. It can be dance, it can be theater, it can be street art, it can be hip hop, and it can be it's linked to les Ateliers Médicis, which is kind of a grant of the French government to promote art in a large sense. So we have the white spot is the space that was somehow given, and we said that we could use somehow all the space that was available to have a very low building, and to say that maybe this building could kind of reorganize somehow the surrounding and interact with the surrounding. And so the idea was to you know, like an onion, to have different rings with inside the core of the performance, and then all the backstage that was somehow turned around, and that the backstage would become somehow the circulation of the building, but it would also become a stage itself towards the city around. So this is the plan where you see in black the cores, and then you see this all the different spaces with the large room in the middle, entrance hall, and the smaller rooms on the side, and all these are movable panels. Logistics was there. Even we thought that logistics were a kind of interesting spaces that we could use as exhibition space. So we did a few of the renderings of the interior, where you could really see that you could really completely open this system from inside to have a relation to the outside. And yes, the core in the middle, in the main room, was then surrounded by secondary rooms, and then surrounded by circulation, and then surrounded by a kind of a architecture of textile curtains that could, that were part of the scenography actually of a theater, and it says that somehow the backstage becomes the stage towards the city. So this box in the middle, we tried many configurations on how to open it and to see what kind of spaces it could create. If you open it in the longitudinal way, I mean, become a kind of a huge walkway to do a fashion show. You could open the spaces on the sides, and you could create a stage in the middle and have seatings on for the four sides. Or you could use the entrance space as a stage that could be accessible from the public space, and you have the seatings at the end. Or you could use it in different two sides, or kind of regroup four sides, and also access from different ways around the building. And the logistics that we also thought was interesting to show. So we have this kind of multitude of spaces and configuration where we somehow planned all the different options that on how this building could be used. This backstage space, it is of course a circulation space as well. It's also a kind of a thermal buffer because we thought this space was not heated. It was maybe just ventilated, and it could be like a in-between zone between the heated parts that are on the right and then the outside space on the left. And then, yes, this experimentation on these huge curtains that were, I mean, very scenographic, that could or lift or kind of open partially, that really kind of created this kind of architecture that could be completely open or completely closed at the same time, depending on the different scenarios and configuration of the building and the space itself. Some of the sections where you see this principle of the big room in the middle, the secondary rooms. We had administration on top, there, and then we had this this backstage space on the side, section in the other way, and yeah, some of the sketches of you know, what we experimented, like if it curtains on every level, really huge curtains. So how do they move? How do we lift? And then we worked a lot with a 3D guy to experiment on how they were moving. And we did this tests and collages also. I mean, it was quite a nice moment to develop this quite soft but strong architectural device of the curtain. Some of the test renderings. Another another thing about freedom, a kind of a typology we worked a lot on is the grid, and well, this is a grid superposed on France. You know, the grid is a kind of a institutional thing that comes top down and kind of organizes and flattens somehow the whole country, because I mean, it says that this grid is just the same. It's not the same, but it's like equivalent to this one. So it's kind of a top-down method of the state to govern, and it kind of fades a little bit the specificities of certain regions. And so it's a whole question about the identity of certain regions that kind of say, oh, I'm from Corsica, I'm a proud guy from Corsica. But yeah, but you're still French, or you're from the north, or I'm from Brest, and oh, we are proud as well. And then you have the Alps here, and so you have this different kind of maybe even cultures. But when you lay out or superpose a grid on the country, then it kind of flattens all this. And we were invited 3 years ago to do an exhibition in a place called La Cité de l'Architektur, which is the French institution for architecture. It's governed, I mean, by the state, you know, it's kind of, it's not Paris, it's the state. So it's really kind of the most institutional place for architecture in France. And yeah, with Arno Brandenhuber, I mean, he's a bit crazy. So we had a few ideas, and we thought about, first we wanted to hack the institution. Was cool. Yeah, we were just after COVID. So the institution was closed for 1 year. So it was kind of a new opening. And so we say, okay, shall we hack the institution? Funny, but how do we do that? And then we went with these with the people of the Cité de l'Architektur to visit their archives. And actually we did find a lot of very cool things. Lights, hundreds, or plexiglass boxes that they use above the models, hundreds. So we said, oh, we have a quite nice material here, and maybe we can do an exhibition with all your archives. They were a bit, they were not so happy about it. I think they didn't want to show they had so much stuff they didn't use. But we thought that creating inside this big entrance of this Cité de l'Architektur a kind of a shelf where they could place their archive, where they could bring down the desk of the director of the Cité de l'Architektur to show what they were doing, I thought was interesting. And it was probably very much provocation at the same time. But it kind of, it was, at the moment when we were just coming out of COVID, it was kind of a big, we said, okay, it's a big spring cleaning. No, we clean everything, we make a grid, we make a big shelf, and then you exhibit all the cool stuff you have. And so we laid out this grid of 1 by 1 meter with black tape everywhere. We have 5 kilometers of black tape. And then, I mean, we started in a corner, and then we didn't know exactly where to stop. So we didn't stop, actually. So we went everywhere on all the walls, the floors, on the staircase, elevators, toilets. So we went completely everywhere. Of course, you had a lot of design questions. I mean, do you go behind the radiator or in front? Do you go behind the tubes or in front? Where do you stop? I mean, the security things, probably we couldn't go in front. I mean, stuff like that. But I mean, it was a kind of a provocation in a way. The people, they weren't very happy. Because you cannot really take the tape off. I mean, you can, but then you take all the plaster and the paint that was already on the walls. That was a kind of part of a installation before. So it was somehow problematic until one day President Macron came to visit the Cité de l'Architecture, not for this, but for kind of another event. And he came through the entrance, and he saw the Republican grid laid over the French Architecture Institution. So, okay, this is nice. And since then, they left the tape, and well, I don't know how long, but at least till now, it's still there. And the grid, I mean, this notion of the grid, we experimented also in different scales. And this is a project in the south of France, in Montpellier. We are close to there is a train station, TGV station here, and I think the city center of Montpellier is, well, it's much more here. We're like in between a kind of a industrial, commercial zone, or a bit over here, highways, and it's a whole new urban development. It's Xavier de Geiter, the urban planner. They do a huge landscape park here to collect the water, because in Montpellier, when it rains really a lot, and so they have to collect the water. So they make this kind of there's a kind of a play with the topography, so they can make a lake out of this. And this building, it's a building for young startup high-tech companies. And we are the first building in the whole neighborhood. So it's always difficult to start first. I mean, we were first in Saclay, and here in Montpellier, we're against first. So we had to find a kind of a urban project that comes before everything else. So this project, it's a grid of 12 by 12 meters. It's a very low building. It's ground floor +1 +2, and it's made on a plan of a Roman city, actually, because it's the Cardo and the Ecumenus, and it's this kind of orthogonal organization with maybe I just have to, or maybe wait, I will go back to a plan. It was easier, where you could cross from the piazza you had here and go through here to the park, and then you had the entrance here and go across the whole building and exit there. So we had this cross, and in the middle you had the forum. So this building, this very low building, is a kind of a low-tech building because it's all based on natural ventilation. The typology of the 12-meter grid was because they asked somehow to do a very standard office size. 18 meters thick, 6 meters on the facades, 6 meters for secondary functions in the middle. No, the usual stuff. And we said, it's maybe not so interesting because it's very basic and we cannot use the building in different ways. So this 12-meter grid allowed us to define actually a system like a chessboard with different typologies of spaces with spatios, inside spaces, outside spaces, cores, atriums, workspaces that are 12 meter deep, so you have natural ventilation, you have natural light. And so we started actually from this idea of having, okay, you have one core, and you have 4 12 by 12 meter working spaces that are connected to this core. And because they wanted also kind of a flexibility of this young emerging companies that could rent, 15 square meters or 30 or 60, they should be able to evolve over time. So we said, okay, we invent a system where we have one core every 2 elements, and then we have toilets or whatever, and then we have all the black is all the workspaces, and they're all interconnected to create a kind of a huge inner landscape where we could define a multitude of activities and functions and interactions between all these different companies. So this is the working model where you see that the entrance, well, is somewhere. No, not. Yeah, it's in this line. And then we define in all of the patios a different character, or they were inside or outside spaces, or they had a specific meeting space, or an auditorium, or a kitchen, or a restaurant. So each of these squares had a specific function. Okay, yeah, well, this is the plan. And this is the entrance hall where you had the square on the back. You have the park you see on the end of the image, and this was just before we finished the construction. So, and then now it's occupied by these different companies that had actually a lot of these spaces were defined for office space, but a lot of the spaces were just defined as temporary, non-programmed spaces where they could actually meet, because that was the whole point of this somehow business landscape, is that you could interact between all these different people and companies. And it's, yeah, I said it's in south of south of France, so it's very warm in the summer. And somehow, because of this typology of patios and sun protections you saw on the facades, this kind of metal grid, kind of very industrial elements, we actually have a very cool building. It has no climatization. It just natural ventilation, or kind of just water-cooled ventilation, but not kind of air conditioning. So it's even in the summer, it's really a nice place to work actually, and the patios actually, they also help to as a kind of a thermal chimney to extract the warm air vertically during the day and during the evenings. So these are all the different cores and the different typologies of occupation that we designed, with the meeting rooms, the covered glass of the atriums, the outside spaces, kind of a terrace space linked to the kitchen and the restaurant, and yeah, just going fastly through the images of these different spaces, with this round circular meeting room, which was acoustically a nightmare that we had to solve. We didn't really anticipate this, but that's it's normal that we. And yeah, these are the staircases. In this course, and then we covered them with this very low-tech cinder blocks. They have holes, so they're acoustic, and so it's a quite low-tech project because we had a very low budget, so we had to decide where to place the money, and we thought it would be more interesting to have really a lot of space and have these extra spaces than just do the kind of fancy things. I think we just didn't feel like doing them. And the idea is that because we had this multitude of cores and this principle of organization, is that it's almost like if you could use in the future the building in different ways, like if it's like a series of independent buildings that are attached and glued together, because I mean we enter from here and here, but you can enter from here, you can enter from one every two or every three kind of square elements on the facade. We had a fab lab that could open on the square. We had all these kind of functions that kind of created a new entrance. So you had not like one entrance, you had like a multitude of entrances that could also give a multitude of building configurations in the future. And the grid, I mean, it has a kind of a, maybe also kind of a, I mean, for us, kind of a poetic, maybe mystical thing. And we did this competition for a church in Belgium, in the Flemish part. And we started to work on this accumulation of stone elements and to see how we could superpose them, compose them, kind of make a small mountain, a small landscape. Because when you do a church, there's a kind of a vertical link to a kind of a cosmic relation. So there was a kind of a verticality that we needed to find, and at the same time a certain kind of horizontality, because the site where we're doing this church was completely flat, and it's the Flanders, so it's completely flat, quite wet landscape. So we experimented on how we could create this kind of piles of stones, and reminds also the when you go to the mountains. I mean, just here you have these cairns that show you the way when you're up in the mountains. That shows some kind of presence, human presence, and so we experimented all these different kind of how we could compose, this superposition of stones. And then we came back to a series of pictures of a photographer in Japan. He's Toshio Shibata, if I remember right. And he takes pictures of these grid infrastructures they use to maintain the mountains, because they tend to fall down. And we were always amazed by the beauty of these structures, because they're at the same time very rough, but at the same time very technical and very poetic at the same time. And we thought maybe we could, for this church, do a piece of landscape. So okay, we had the idea of a mountain, about this superposition of elements, and then we said, okay, let's make a landscape. But how do we need to maintain this landscape? We need to hold this grass and this wet landscape on this mountain. So we created this grid structure that holded the landscape, and inside this this mountain we had a small entrance, and we had the church. Yeah, this was the entrance. And then we inverted the church, and we made a theater, a kind of a utopian theater, where, well, actually the walls that are inclined became the seatings. I mean, of course, it's very utopian, because it's just by love of kind of an architectural project, a drawing. But we liked the idea of working with theater, and we liked working with the idea of working with utopia. And 2 years ago, almost 2 years ago, we won the competition to do the French pavilion at the Biennale in Venice. And yeah, we wanted to make a kind of a strange piece of architecture. We didn't want to make an exhibition, so it was not a retrospective of the French architecture of the last years. We said, I mean, we are only going to make the pavilion once, so I mean, we have to do some piece of architecture. I mean, that's what we do. We're architects. We're not there to just do an exhibition. So we said, maybe we can invent a structure, an architecture in this pavilion that that it's somehow a mix between a disco ball, between a spaceship, between a theater, between a thing that a kid would do in his backyard or in his garage, playing and kind of composing and adding stuff, and placing this kind of strange object inside the French pavilion. And this, yeah, we liked, because, I mean, we always reminded about the crisis and the next catastrophic event, and we said, okay, I mean, we cannot just talk about that. We need a moment where we are able to remind us it's still possible to invent something else and to think, I mean, give ourselves the opportunity to think of an utopian somewhere else. So we said that, okay, maybe a theater is a place where you can think of somewhere else. So we created this this strange object inside the French pavilion, and I mean, the round sphere, I mean, it's of course a very utopian architectural object. And you see, we made it as big as possible. It's almost touching the ceiling of the French pavilion. I mean, we had very little budget, like probably all the pavilions. But we said, okay, we use the money to make the biggest theater as possible, and we use the money to find a kind of an occupation of this theater. Because you cannot just build a theater and that's it. If you do a theater, you need to find, I mean, how do you use the theater, and how are you going to use the theater for the 6 months of the Biennale? So the money went into the building and into the occupation of this the theater. Yeah, just some of the research of this kind of this mood boards we create when we think of projects. So we have all this set of references of experiments. I mean, we liked this spherical object. We wanted to make initially a complete sphere, but for budget reasons we had no money, so we only built half. But maybe it's better to build half, because you could see the section of this object, and I think it's even more interesting than seeing the object completely finished. Yeah, going through fastly these reference images, and yeah, some of the you will see later. But so we had the sphere. I mean, the half of the sphere in the center, and then in the other rooms we had objects, and objects that are somehow parts of a sound installation of found objects that we can reused. They're all objects that we found in the region of Vienna. We went with a truck to junkyards and collected all these objects and placed them, and then we combined them with a sound installation where all these objects start to talk to each other. That's why you will see all these speakers. You see all the cables connecting all these objects together. Yeah, this some of the study models, I mean, yeah, about the materiality, it really looked like a disco ball or a spaceship. And you don't know if it landed or it was going to take off. So we're in between, and we like this ambiguity. And the people that were visiting the French pavilion, actually they interpreted the pavilion in different ways. And that was quite interesting. Journalists asked us, I mean, what's your statement? We said, we have no statement. We had a very small text that was glued on the wall, but it was not like a full explanation of what we wanted to do. So it was really a place where you had to experience the architecture, and where you were looking for a kind of interaction or kind of emotion between this architecture and yourself. It worked quite well, because you also, maybe because of the sphere was only half, so you could almost be on the stage or just next to it, but you were still inside a kind of a virtual sphere, because when we placed the other piece of furniture, it kind of recreated the sphere, and so this tension to this theater was quite. It worked quite well. Just study models. The study models on the different objects that we were going to place. We want to place speakers, a big mirror. We wanted to find a ladder, a stage, all these kind of elements that were, technical elements or kind of scenographic elements that were just going to complete this sphere. And this is the plan. You see the entrance. It's on the lower side, and this is the hemisphere. And in the other rooms you find the other objects that we kind of gathered in the around Venice, and some of the objects we kind of combined to transform them a little bit. So they looked like really found objects, but they looked really strange because we changed a little bit, or we glued two pieces of found things, and then to recreate something a bit playful. You will see with his toys. These toys for kids. So this is entrance, and you come from the back of the theater, so you don't see really what's happening. So you really have to enter, and then walk around, and then once you cross the corner, then you see and you discover what's happening on the inside. Okay, we get closer. You see this kind of strange spaceship in the middle, and this was during the construction where we had the steel frame. The frame is built in the shipyard 200 meters away from the French pavilion. So it's somehow a very local construction, because they build ships and these kind of elements all the day. And so we just had to build it, transport it for 200 meters on a kind of a boat, and then build it up in the French pavilion. The idea is also that we could mount and unmount the structure, and to make it travel. So these are some of the detailing. It's very low tech, very rough. It was just with double face glue. We kind of glue this metallic foil on the steel structure, and there you turn around and you discover all the other elements that are part of this kind of installation, with the mirrors, with these kind of cables. We had microphone. You see the small one there. You had a microphone. So the sound installation was very important, because when you were pushing on the red button, you could speak in the microphone, and then the sound was recorded and played in all these different speakers. You had very different kinds. This was a very low bass speaker, and the table was somehow moving, so it was like really low sound. And then you had very high pitch speakers that were somehow hidden or reflecting in the mirror. So it was really interacting with the people walking and inside the pavilion. And and so the idea, I said, okay, half of the budget went into the construction and half of the budget went into the occupation of the theater. So we had, for 6 months, each month we had 1 week per month, actually. We had a performance. We had 3, these were drag queens, and we had dance performances, and we had also architecture schools that came, and they had a residency for 1 week. And so all of these people, they didn't know how to use the space before, so they came to the pavilion, and then they started to improvise or kind of lay out their stuff, and it was a real working space for the artists or for the architecture schools. We had a radio, we had for an architecture school, we had, when we did our studio in Vienna, we invited all the students to come to Venice, so we had a workshop for 2 days in the pavilion. So it was really really nice, and this was the opening. And it's really strange because the dancers performed a kind of a very moody dance with kind of a piano sound and stuff like that. And it was amazing that half of the people in the audience, they were crying at the end of the performance because they really felt connected to the performance itself, and they were so emotional. And there are a bunch of quite famous French architects, and they all came with the red eyes, and but it was quite, and that's maybe we think it's because there was a kind of a interaction between the architecture and how the space was organized. The space, you almost were on the same stage as the performances, and they. And of course, when we had this drag queens and this ball theater, it was part of a kind of a message about inclusivity. When the name of the theater was the Ball Theater, and the Ball is also in this movement in the U.S. when we had all the black communities or the gay communities that were dancing in the back rooms. In New York, they called it the ball, and it was a moment of freedom where they could really express and be their own. And I think maybe that's why I think the audience felt so connected, because they felt like they can just be their own, and they were transported to somewhere else. And for us, it was kind of a somehow, for us, we were happy that there was a kind of emotion, and that architecture could create this emotion. This was another where they kind of did sound experiments. We had dancing, and then here you see some of the objects that were looked like call it in French tourniquet, where children play and they sit and they turn like in the playgrounds. And it's kind of a transformation of these kind of objects that we found and that we recreated to have a kind of a strange ladder. We had this kind of turning element that we kind of recomposed with other objects. We kind of recreated spheres, and all these artists, they kind of somehow took possession of the space and the objects and used them in ways we didn't anticipate. And so people were asking us, but when is the next show? When is the next show? You just have to come. Because they're just there, and they're just it's a residency. So people came and they were waiting, and so just for the next performance. So we had a bunch of experiments, and that's the other rooms. And all these objects, they were found objects that we all gathered. So they were really cheap. It was good. And they really, it was okay to have one room which was very dense and the other room a bit more open. and they were anyway they were all connected with these cables, because you know we had speakers and all these objects, and it's like all these objects were speaking to each other with a kind of a strange language that you could not really understand. That's why it looked like a kind of a spaceship that landed there and they started to communicate, a kind of a proto-language and a proto-architecture. Yeah, some of these objects. And yeah, then the idea was to unmount it and to remount. So we did it once for the moment. And this is in Leipzig. And you know, this is a Niemeyer sphere. I think maybe one of his last projects. And so this we moved the theater there for kind of in the summer for a festival. So it stayed there for 2 months, and they had all these kind of representations and shows in the space. We had to adapt somehow the structure because inside the pavilion we were inside space. We had no wind load, etc. We had no foundations. It was easy. And there it was standing outside, so we had to build a foundation. We had to attach it. There was wind pressure. And that's why also we had to, all these small elements, they're free floating, so they had less wind pressure as in the French pavilion. So we had to reinvent a little bit the technicity and the aesthetic of the project. And this blue plastic things, like you have in these industrial warehouses, because it's a kind of an industrial warehouse around, that divide the spaces, or do you have on trucks and stuff like that. So we glued all these elements, we cut them, and then we glued them on the structure. And so the sphere, well, lifted off from Venice, landed in Leipzig, and now it will move to Portugal, and then it will go to Wolfsburg, and then maybe somewhere else, we don't know. It's quite a budget to move a thing like that, to unmount and remount. It takes actually some time, but it is completely doable, and it's not so difficult to unscrew and rescrew this whole structure. Yeah, I think that was the last image, and yeah. So if I want to summarize briefly, what we try to do, going from the barricade to this temporary structure, passing through the real architecture that we did, is that we try to think of architecture as a way to be free, and as a way to experiment different types of occupation. And if we can reach this point where we can show this occupation, then we can play with time, we can play with temporary moments where it's full of people, temporary moments where it's completely empty. I think that's what we are globally looking for into the architecture we do, and all of these moments of teaching or scenographic elements. They're also kind of an experiment for us to work on these topics, to then transform them into real architecture. It's a challenge, it's not easy, but it's actually what we're aiming for. Thank you.